Welcome to episode 2 of A Year in My Garden. In this episode of A Year in My Garden, find out how buying clearance plants can save you money. Remember the rhubarb that I started to force? Has it worked? Do you like raspberries? I'll be showing you how to grow them, and I'm actually going to move mine to a new home. I'm also doing an experiment on bulbs, buying them pre-forced and putting them in different situations. Will they perform? Early on this year, I visited my local garden centre to take a look at all the forced bulbs that they had. That's bulbs grown in pots and containers like daffodils, hyacinths and crocus. And then I thought to myself, hold on, this is the ideal opportunity to do a cheeky experiment. So here's what I've chosen. Now this experiment is going to identify how each of these perform, what the flowers look like, and is it better to buy bigger or lots of smaller? And you're going to get a chance to see each and every one of these plants in flower, so keep on watching. First up, I've chosen the giant bulbs. Look at the size of these bulbs for daffodils. I'm going to put those into the ground and let's see them erupt from the soil and flower, and you can tell the difference. Next, what if I just leave them in the container? These muscari here, I'm going to leave them in this pot just like this and put it on the steps outside the house and see how they perform. And keep watching this video because each and every one of these bulbs, we're going to show you what they look like when they're in full flower, looking spectacular. I'll also show you how this little white section on bulbs, you see them on lots of different bulbs, is going to help you with the planting distance as we put them into the ground. And also, is it better to buy smaller or bigger? Also, you probably always want to know this. Do the labels actually match up to the flowers that come out? So we've got irises, blues and whites, we've got puschinias, scillas, we've got hyacinths and tulips. We're going to be checking what the flowers do as they come out, and do they actually look like the label? So keep on watching. Also, is it better to be buying one bigger one or lots of smaller ones? We're going to pro rata and plant them to the same value, and you can see whether it's better and more visually effective to buy lots of smaller ones that are cheaper rather than the one big one. And again, all of these bulbs we're going to be putting into the ground or leaving in containers, but whatever the case, you get to see what they look like when they open in flower. Right, let's get them home. Right, it's been a few days since I went to the garden centre and bought the bulbs. I've had a haircut, and now it's the time to actually plant them into the ground. I love this time, setting off some glory and beauty for spring to come. Now, normally when you plant bulbs into the ground, let me just show you, a normal bulb, you would plant it, this is approximate 2.5 times the height of the bulb underneath the soil, because that's really how they live. So with this here that I bought from the garden centre, do not plant them the same level they're in the pot, because that way the bulb will be slightly proud of the soil. So if you take a look at it, the height of the bulb is roughly that, 1, 2.5. And by coincidence, this sleeve here is giving me a guideline. So I'm planting the bulb underneath the soil to this sort of height, just where the leaf breaks from this outer sleeve or skirt, however you wish to call it. So I'm planting it that sort of depth into the soil itself. Now, the bulbs will tolerate most conditions. They're as tough as anything. They just don't like wet bottoms. They do not like to be in very soggy soil, because that can rot the bulb. So in most cases you can plant them straight into the ground. If you want to give them an extra bit of help, if you're in moist soil, you can do that by either buying bulb fibre, and bulb fibre is a mix really between peat-free compost and some sand and grit, or you can mix your own if you wish. And that sand and grit gives it an extra bit of drainage, helping. Now you could even add in some slow release fertilizer and mix that in, so later when the bulb starts to die back down, it can use that energy from the fertilizer to recharge the bulb. It's as simple as that. Right, let's get this in the ground. I'll come back and check on the progress of all the bulbs a little later on in the show. Next up, moving raspberries. Just behind me here are my raspberries. it was a bit of a default position. It was the first bed we made ready when we started to build this Grow Your Own area about 2-3 years ago. And it was just coming at the end of autumn into spring, and I had to get them into the ground, so I planted them here. It's not an ideal position because the hedge has grown up a bit. We've thinned this tree out a bit, but it does put shade into this spot. And raspberries prefer a sunnier position. Raspberries will grow in partial shade, but not with as much vigour and fruiting as they do with a really nice sunny position. Now the sunny position is usually from north to south, so the raspberries don't shade each other. So if you do them in the north-south, north is in that direction, south in that direction, so at least they were in the right direction. But I am now going to move them into a much brighter location. The secret is two real types of raspberries. There's the summer fruiting raspberries, and then there's the autumn. Now the autumn are more like small bushes. In fact, you can buy some dwarf ones to grow in containers, but I happen to have some of them just over the other side, and they've done particularly well. Just prune the old stems down to the ground in February, and new ones will start growing in spring. And then there are the summer fruiting ones that are more traditional, and they produce wood to produce fruit over a couple of years. So year one is prima canes, prima meaning first, and they send up these shoots of very healthy, upright, no side branches, just one shoot straight up. And then the next year this prima matures into a flora, and that means it has little side shoots and it produces all the lovely raspberries. So as you can see behind me here, this big one here is an upright, it's a prima cane that was produced last year, and the flora canes, well, there's some of them here, they're quite brittle now because they've served their purpose. You usually get some side branches here. Look, you can see where raspberries used to be. They're no good now, so you can prune those off, put them into the compost heap, very good carbon for the compost heap, and just leave these prima canes. And this year, they will produce side shoots and they will fruit while the plant is sending up the next year's prima cane. So it's a very nice system as it goes through. So I'm going to be pruning out the old flora canes, and I'm going to thin them out a little bit so the amount of head space isn't too dominated by loads of branches. I just want some really good high performing ones, and I'm going to dig them up from here, which I can do at this time of year because everything's dormant, and move them into a location that is much brighter. Now as I move them, I'm going to get a pretty good idea of the health of the canes that are in there, because you don't have to plant raspberries every year. You buy them and put them into the ground and they establish themselves. You can replace some of them if they get a little bit older, or you can buy new varieties as well in garden centres. They're sold during the autumn time as bare root, sort of like a cluster of stems. When you buy that pot, don't plant the whole thing in. That's not one plant. You have to take it out of the pot and take the elastic band off and separate them, and you'll find you'll have 5 separate plants. But as I dig these up, I'm going to see how big the clump is. If I can do a little bit of division and split them up a little bit, I'll do that. But the main thing for me is to reduce some of the head so there's a good balance, that the root is in proportion with the top, and then they're going to go into their new location. And this location is perfect because it gets a great deal of sun from this side. Hedging is being cut back. In fact, I'm going to cut it back a little bit more so it's getting the sunlight. And the other thing is it's quite sheltered. With the Kida greenhouse behind me here, it's acting to stop any of the winds come around. And having a shelter position for your raspberries helps in a couple of reasons. One, it's pollinators. If you're in a very exposed area, the pollinators get blown all over the place. When it's a little bit more sheltered, they spend a bit more time working their way around. And secondly, if it's very exposed, sometimes if your raspberries are really producing a lot of fruit, there's a weight on that branch, and if they're getting gusted around, they can get damaged. So location-wise, the sun and the shelter, it's a good spot for raspberries. Now, the other thing is the soil, because raspberries prefer to have quite a well-drained soil. They do not like their feet in sodden, muddy water. And we've got pretty good soil in the beds just over here for the strawberries and the currants and the like. Yet when we started to cultivate this section here, we found there's quite a bit of clay. So I can assume when they were putting the building just over there, they've dumped some of the soil into this area, and there's some subsoil mixed in. Anyway, we've cleared out as much as we can. We've rotavated it over, as you can see, but it's not ideal because I really want it to be highly fertile, but I want it free draining as well, because if there's plenty of food and there's moisture when the raspberry needs it, but the raspberry's not sitting in wet soil, that's when they really do perform. So I'm going to re-energize this soil area here. So if you've got problems with soil or clay soil or unhealthy garden, keep watching, because what I'm going to do is I'll show you how I'm going to transform mine here, and those hints and tips may be good for you in your own garden. Up next, let's check on the progress on my forced flower bulbs. It's been a few weeks now, so let's see how our experiment of planting out forced bulbs go. Well, first of all, these ones here, they haven't done as well. There is marks on the tip of the foliage. This is one of the flowers. It looks pretty weak. And we've had a couple of frosts. They've not performed quite as well. The secret when you're buying daffodils that are being forced is to feel the tougher the foliage, the colder they've been grown. If it's slightly soft, then you know that they had a bit of heat. So we'll leave them in, see how they get on. The experiment is ongoing. If you remember just over here, there was 2 lots of planting. I bought individual pots, same variety of daffodil. I bought individual pots to the same value and planted them here. And they seem to be doing all right. And I quite like the fact that they're spread out a bit. It's going to help them longer as the years go on and they start to spread. They're going into the open ground in between. The flowers are just about to open, but the foliage is really good. So I think these have settled in pretty well. And if you remember, I planted one big bowl at the same value all in together, and well, there's a lot of colour, but the flowers are earlier than those ones, and they are the same variety. And I think the fact that they're all in together in one pot is obviously helped with the heat, where as the other ones are planted individual, the bulbs have been slightly cooler, therefore later. But you know, they've come on, they've pushed up some of the soil, as you can see here, because we'd only just planted them, but they've settled themselves in, and next year as they come up they will be more even. But I think I prefer the spaced out ones for the visual effect rather than the ones all grouped together. Now this is really interesting over here. We planted that big bowl of very tough cold grown daffs, and not much has happened. They've kept themselves quite tight. They're in very good position. They're still growing. Everything's good with them, but it's slowed down the growth. Now at the same time I bought these, I bought another one. Same variety, and look at the difference. Now that has, to be fair, been on a table by the back of the house, but not a similar type of aspect, getting the same, but because it's been in the ground, this one, and this one's been above the ground, these ones have shot up, whether those ones are slightly stunted. But don't worry, these ones will continue to grow and should look like that. So let's visit them later on and see what the next stage is. Let's check up on the muscari. Just take a look at this now. Now it's open into flower. Well, I say open, there's still plenty of buds right at the top yet to open up. How gorgeous is this? It puts a smile on my face when I leave the door there to go out, or welcomes me back at the same time. We spent £23 on this particular pot here, and I've had my money's worth already. And you just think, if you bought them in bulbs rather than pre-grown in a pot, if you bought them in bulbs in autumn, it'd be half the amount. So that's why planting bulbs in autumn and growing them, you get a lot of bang for your buck. But even buying it in container late, I think that's really gorgeous. What I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this so I can re-energize the bulbs. And when they die down after spring into summer, I'm going to dry them out and then replant them in the ground. And I'll get this again and again and again. Bulbs are a really good investment in the garden. Aren't you gorgeous? And my bees from the hives just over the back have been all over this. I have interrupted them by taking a time to show it to you, but they'll be back again as soon as I go. Now let's go and take a look at the bulbs that I bought to see whether the flowers actually compare to what is on the picture of the label. Now let's see whether these flowers have turned out exactly like the label. Now some of them are flowered a bit earlier, but I did film them beforehand. First off is the crocus. Now this is the label here, and although these ones have gone over, this is what they look like a couple of weeks ago. Very close to the label. Lovely primrose flowers, green leaves as well. So I think I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. Came up pretty much like the label. Now we move on to this iris here. Now this is Iris Pauline. This flowered again a little earlier on, which is quite surprising because the other varieties are a little bit later. So this is the label here, and this is what the iris looked like. I think it looked better than the label, actually. Much better. Now the two here, the hyacinths and the tulips, they're still growing, so they're coming on. Now at the front I've got the little cilias. Now they're coming up, they're not quite full yet, there's more coming through, so again we'll check those later. But the heroes are these iris here. Now this one here is called Frozen Planet, and it is miles better than the label. Look at that compared to that. It's gorgeous. If I'd known that it was going to come out to look as beautiful as that, I would have bought a bit of 10 or 12 pots of it. But isn't that gorgeous? And then there's one over here, which is Harmony. And again, the flower looks miles better than the picture. Isn't that just gorgeous? And the centre bit is just going over here as well. And it's still looking this good. So there you have it. In some cases, the flowers themselves look better than the label. There isn't any example where the label is better than the flower, but I've got to come back and take a look at the cilias and the tulips and the hyacinth. Up next, let's take a look at the progress of my rhubarb. Has it forced? Right, let's take a look to see how the rhubarb has done. If you remember in last episode, it looked like this before I put the cover over the top. It's been a week or so now. Are you ready? For the reveal. Ooh, you're in for a surprise. To this. Look at those gorgeous stems. And to see how, just look at the ones just in front there, you can see just how much these have grown with a little bit of warmth thanks to the cover. I'm going to leave this on. I'm going to draw them up even further to get more of these juicy stems for my first homemade, homegrown rhubarb crumble. I can't wait. Back in there. Now, for those of you who want to save some money and also watch an interesting experiment of mine, let's go over to the greenhouse, and I've bought some discount plants and I'm hoping to bring them back to life. Now here's something I want to show you. It's all about saving money, and some of the best places that I go to when I get into the garden centre is where they're discounting plants, because that is a license to get a lot of bang for your buck. Now these ones here are little violas, and they look a bit scrappy. They've probably gone through a frost in the garden centre, but they're still very much green. And I picked up 3 packs, 50p each. Everybody's looking, what's he buying those for? But they're going in the trolley because I've got the no. Now what they produce is these little flowers here. Now that is a salad crop, because you can actually eat viola flowers. They are absolutely marvellous on the top of salad or rice. If you freeze them in ice cubes, they look something really nice for summer drinks as you drop them in. And the flower itself, it's a little fragrant flower, slightly peppery as well. But always make sure if you are cropping violas or any flowers for eating that you don't use any sprays, any chemicals at all. I don't use the chemicals on the garden, so I'm fine with that. So I think 50p for 6 is incredibly good value. So I'm going to plant them just behind me here in a row, just to see how they grow, and you can join me later to see how they've actually produced. And I'm going to do a couple of the lines in here and get them growing. So I've got these raised beds under cover, but you could use cloches, little polythene tunnels. You could grow them in a greenhouse that you've got, in a grow bag, in a unheated porch or conservatory. But I think these little things at 50p are going to do very well. So I squeeze the bottom, just loosens the root, squeeze the bottom of that one. I squeeze them all really. You'd be better for them to all come out than try and tease and damage each of them. There we go. It's got a good little root system in. Let's get them in. They're very high in vitamin C as well if you're cropping these for consumption. So I've created these little raised beds in here. I've used and recycled some plastic, but you could use scaffolding boards or any material that really creates a container. And I've got a mixture of peat-free compost. A bit further down there's a little bit of farm manure as well. And I'm just going to do a line of these. There we go. And bed them in, and we'll find out how good they are. Now these ones didn't look quite as good. Okay, tip them out. So you just think about it. 50p a tray of 6. They're just over 8p each. So there we have it. Just for £1.50, I've got a little area here of violas, and because I'm growing them inside rather than outside, I will be getting an earlier crop, but you could just as easily do it during late spring, summertime outside. So turn on your notifications and I'll let you know when the next program is, and you can see how they performed. In the next episode, there's loads of fun. How to prune your fruit bushes. Also, the progress of my amaryllis and hyacinth. And will my bargain bucket plants thrive or fail? Until next time, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more great content like this. And also, if you turn on your notifications, you'll never miss a video from me.